the HistoryNetwork.org podcast. This episode is brought to you by harrys.com, and with details of a great offer we can get you from Harry's, together with news of what's coming up in episode 6. Do stay tuned so you don't miss out. Season 18, episode 5, Marcus Agrippa, right-hand man of Caesar Augustus, by Lindsay Powell. Lindsay is a historian and writer with a passion for the history of the Roman Empire. He is a columnist for Ancient Warfare magazine, and his articles have appeared in many other military history magazines. Lindsay is the author of Eager for Glory, a groundbreaking biography of Drusus the Elder, discussed in Season 11, Episode 3, and Germanicus, discussed in Season 15, Episode 9. His latest book, Marcus Agrippa, is the first biography of Caesar Augustus's right-hand man to be published in English in nearly 80 years. In elegant bronze capitals, the name Marcus Agrippa graces one of the most famous and iconic buildings to survive from antiquity, the domed Pantheon in Rome. He was one of ancient Rome's most remarkable sons, and the best friend and general of Caesar Augustus, yet the extraordinary story of his rise from obscurity to be the second most important man in the Roman world is known to remarkably few. Mystery enshrouds the early years of the life of Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. He was born in either 64 or 63 BC, but no one knows where. His father was called Lucius. He had a brother of the same name and a sister called Vipsania Polla, but who his mother was is lost to history. His origins are often described by Roman historians as humble, though that does not necessarily mean that they were poor. He came from an obscure plebeian clan that lived some distance from Rome, a fact which would make him an outsider in the eyes of the powerful men of the city of Seven Hills. Early in his life he seems to have decided to distance himself from his roots by dropping Vipsanius from his name, preferring to be known plainly as Marcus Agrippa, a decision some contemporaries saw as eccentric and even mocked him for. His early years are just as obscure. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder mentions the misera iuventa, which can mean the misfortunes of his youth, or that he was an unhappy youth, without elaborating further. At some point he left home and went to Rome to receive his education. Now in his teens, it was while in the city that he formed a close friendship with Julius Caesar's great-nephew, Caius Octavius Turinus, the future Emperor Caesar Augustus. It was a lifelong relationship that would change world history. When Julius Caesar was campaigning against his rival Cnaeus Pompeius Magnus, aka Pompey the Great, in 45 BC, Caius Octavius went to join him in Hispania Caeterior, northern Spain. Agrippa may have accompanied him on the outbound journey, or gone ahead of him, perhaps even taking part in the Battle of Munda. Julius Caesar seems to have known of young Agrippa and approved of his great-nephew's friendship with him. At the end of the campaign, the teenagers returned to Rome by sea, and then headed to Apollonia on the coast of Illyricum, modern Albania. There they continued their schooling under their teacher of rhetoric, Apollodorus of Pergamum, and were also taught drill and basic combat skills by men from one of the legions stationed in Macedonia in preparation for joining Caesar on his next campaign. By now, dictator of Rome, Caesar planned a war with Parthia, but he would not live to see a Roman victory over their eastern enemy. Octavius learnt of Julius Caesar's assassination on the Ides of March 44 BC, when a letter from his mother was delivered by messenger to him in Apollonia. Some advised him to stay put and wait for the nearest legion to arrive, but Octavius followed his instinct and made up his mind to return to Rome. Unflinchingly, the 19-year-old Agrippa decided to accompany his friend. They stayed at his stepfather's villa at Puteoli, modern Pozzuoli, in Campania. Nearby was a holiday home of the elder statesman
Marcus Tullius Cicero.
While visiting as his guest, Octavius learnt that he was Caesar's legal heir. However, between him receiving his legacy was Julius Caesar's former deputy, Marcus Antonius, who would spend the next several months working to frustrate Octavius getting his inheritance. Agrippa, on the other hand, would be instrumental in asserting his friend's rights. He helped him raise troops from among retired veterans and sympathizers in Campania during October of 44 BC, and he was with him at the Battle of Forum Gallorum and the Siege of Mutina in April of the following year, two pivotal military engagements that established Octavius as a force to be reckoned with, and which led to him finally reconciling and allying with Antonius. Back in Rome during August 43 BC, Agrippa led the prosecution in court of one of the ringleaders of Caesar's assassination, Caius Cassius Longinus. He successfully secured a guilty verdict. Later, in November that year, his friend Octavius was recognized as the official heir of Julius Caesar, and he took his full name as his own. With Marcus Antonius and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, he formed a triumvirate, a legal commission of 3 men, working to restore the Republic to the Roman people. One outcome of this was the division of the empire between the 3 of them. The next year, the triumvirate turned its attention to avenging Julius Caesar. In October 42 BC they found the ringleaders, Cassius and his accomplice Marcus Junius Brutus, with their armies at Philippi in northern Greece. 2 brutal battles were fought, ending in the deaths of Caesar's assassins. Octavius and Agrippa were also at Philippi, though perhaps not as combatants. Pliny the Elder reports Agrippa nursed his friend back to health after a bout of dropsy. The deaths of Caesar's assassins did not, however, end the turmoil engulfing the Roman state. While Marcus Antonius went to administer his territory in the east, his brother Lucius protested against Octavius's policies about settling his army veterans in the west. To challenge him, Lucius raised an army with the help of Fulvia, his sister-in-law. In the ensuing Perusine War of 41 BC, Agrippa's involvement was crucial to defeating Lucius at the siege of Fulginae, modern Foligno. There he outwitted more experienced generals and proved that he could both plan strategically and execute tactically. In recognition of his services, Agrippa was appointed Praetor Urbanus, the most senior of the several elected officials responsible for administering justice in the city of Rome. In 39 BC, Agrippa went to Gaul as governor. The lands Julius Caesar annexed at great cost in Gallic blood in the 50s BC had been largely left unsupervised and undeveloped. Agrippa changed that. He set about establishing the vital road network that helped transform Caesar's conquests into viable provinces by connecting its principal settlements. Roads radiated out from the principal city of Lugdunum, modern Lyon, north to the Rhine, east to the Alps, and west to the Atlantic coast. During his time there, the Aquitani, a federation of tribes who lived on the western side of Gaul, rose up in revolt. Agrippa responded fast and decisively, squashing the rebels in a single campaign. A year later, in Ubii, a Germanic tribe that was an ally of the Romans since Julius Caesar's time, appealed for Agrippa's assistance after being harassed by the neighbouring Suebi. Agrippa led a punitive raid into Germany, making him only the second Roman commander since Caesar to cross the Rhine with an army. Going one step further than Caesar, he granted the Ubii sanctuary on Roman territory, founding for them the city of Oppidum Ubiorum on the right bank of the river, which in time would become modern-day Cologne. For his achievements abroad, Agrippa was appointed as one of the consuls, the two highest magistracies in the Roman political system, for 37 BC. He was also granted a triumph, but in a remarkable move he declined it, perhaps not wishing to upstage his friend. It would not be the last time. While Agrippa had been campaigning in Gaul and Germany, Sextus Pompeius, youngest son of Pompey the Great, waged a guerrilla war against the heir of Julius Caesar. His ships were interrupting the grain supply from Sicily to Rome that fed the city's poor and army veterans, and harassing the cities along the Italian coast with hit-and-run raids. Octavius's efforts to deal with the menace which threatened his base of popular support in Rome had ended in failure when he was roundly defeated at the naval battle of Messina. In contrast, Agrippa had emerged as a reliable and effective commander who could get results, and had proved the most loyal of friends to Octavius. He placed Agrippa, now back in Italy, in charge of building a fleet with which to defeat his adversary. While directing the preparations for the war against Sextus Pompeius, Agrippa would demonstrate his talent for project management, military architecture, and war machines. Within just a few months, Agrippa built a double harbour by joining two natural inland lakes with a channel and constructing a breakwater in the bay of Pozzuoli, fabricated using hydraulic concrete, a material that set hard as rock in seawater. Called Portus
Iulius,
it was hailed as a man-made wonder of its day. 3 banked triremes, some towering up to 13 feet above the waterline, were delivered from the coastal communities of Italy to Portus Iulius. Once received, they were fitted out with collapsing wooden artillery towers of Agrippa's own design, so they would not be a hindrance during the voyage, but could be quickly raised just before battle. They were provisioned with catapults that fired the harpax, a grapnel attached to a chain and capstan to hook an enemy ship and haul it close in, and also equipped with the corvus, a movable platform that locked the ships together and allowed troops to rapidly board the captured vessel. Oarsmen, many of them former slaves, freed specifically for the war effort, were trained to row in tandem on practice benches and then on real ships upon the tranquil waters of the inner harbours. The following year, 36 BC, after an initial setback caused by storms, Agrippa led his fleet of 300 or so ships down the coast and across the Tyrrhenian Sea to the Engaddi Islands located within sight of Sicily. At Mylae his ships engaged those of Sextus's admiral Apollophanes. Agrippa's larger, heavier ships bore down on the enemy's smaller vessels, modelled on those used by Liburnian crews for piracy expeditions along the Illyrian coast. Catapults launched sharps into the air, and men readied themselves to board their enemy's ships. Agrippa himself aimed straight for the flagship of his opponent's fleet and smashed into it with its great bronze beak. Crippled in the water, its captain abandoned ship and dived into the sea to save his own life. Agrippa was eager to press ahead with his attack, but was advised by his own pilots to be wary of running aground on the shoals, and smartly he halted the operation. Meanwhile, Octavius made progress on land, eventually linking up with Lepidus, who had brought troops from Africa. He parleyed with Sextus, and the two commanders agreed to settle the war on the outcome of one last battle at sea on the 3rd of September at a place called Naulochus. While the troops of both armies lined the shore to witness the coming naval engagement, Agrippa moved his fleet into position opposite the 300 ships of Apollophanes. The rowers heaved on their oars and the ships lurched towards each other. Battle commenced. Brute force met military technology, as the Roman historian Appian relates the events of that day. The commanders cheered their men, and all the machines were brought into requisition. The Harpago achieved the greatest success. Thrown from a long distance upon the ships, as it could be by reason of its lightness, it clutched them, especially when the ropes pulled on it from behind. On account of the iron bands, it could not easily be cut by the men whom it attacked, and those who tried to cut the ropes were prevented from reaching them by its length. As this apparatus had never been known before, the enemy had not provided themselves with scythe-mounted poles. One thing seemed advisable in this unexpected emergency, and that was to backwater and draw the ship away. But as the enemy did the same, the force exerted by the men was equal on both sides, and the Harpago did its work. When ships locked together and men boarded the other vessels, it became difficult to tell friend from foe. Both sides spoke Latin, both had similar arms and armour. Only the colours of the artillery towers identified the ship's allegiance. Eventually, Agrippa's marines gained the upper hand. 28 of Sextus's ships were sunk. Seeing victory slipping away, the Pompeians raised the sails of their 17 remaining ships and headed off in the direction of the Straits of Messina. Sextus escaped with his family in the hope of finding sanctuary with Marcus Antonius in the east. Agrippa lost only 3 ships that day. Victory at sea was his. On the shoreline, Octavius received the surrender of Pompeius's legions. Apparently, having learnt the arts of naval warfare as he went along through his victories at Mylae and Naulochus, he had established a reputation as a bold admiral. Octavius rewarded him with unique honours, a rostral crown, a laurel wreath featuring miniature ships' rams, which he was permitted to wear in public and which was depicted on coins and statues, and a sea-blue coloured flag, which was flown on the ship Agrippa used whenever he chose to travel by sea. Relations between the members of the Triumvirate gradually deteriorated. Octavius summarily dismissed Lepidus from the Triumvirate, leaving himself the only other contender with Julius Caesar's former deputy in the struggle for control of the Roman world. They worsened further when Antonius allied with Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. Finally, war between the rivals became inevitable. At the end of 32 BC, Antonius moved his army and navy near to a small village called Actium on the southern promontory of the Gulf of Ambracia, a natural harbour that opened into the Ionian Sea off western Greece. From here he could launch an invasion of Italy. Octavius now had to respond decisively. The Actian War had begun. Agrippa's talent for naval warfare was the crucial advantage Octavius had over Antonius. He placed his friend in overall command of military operations. During the war against Sextus Pompeius 6 years before, Agrippa had learnt much about naval warfare. This time he chose the agility and manoeuvrability of smaller Liburnians over larger triremes. Ironically, his opponent Antonius picked large, heavy vessels, believing they had been key to Agrippa's victories at Mylae and Naulochus. Agrippa initially established himself at Corfu. From there he led hit-and-run raids along the western coastline of Greece, right down to Methone on the tip of the Peloponnese, attacking Antonius's allies and bases wherever he found them. Back in Italy, Octavius used the news of his friend's successes to galvanize political support. In June or July he moved his troops to
Epirus,
and thence to the northern side of the Gulf of Ambracia, opposite Antonius and Cleopatra. The two sides waited for the inevitable clash. The weeks dragged on, turning into months. Despite attempts, Agrippa and Octavius could not get Antonius to engage them in open battle. On dry land, Octavius had 80,000 infantry and 12,000 cavalrymen under the command of Titus Statilius Taurus, while Antonius had 120,000 infantry and 12,000 cavalry under Publius Canidius Crassus. Yet the numerically superior odds in Antonius's favour would not matter. This war was to be decided upon the water. Agrippa commanded perhaps between 230 and 250 ships. Antonius perhaps had as few as 170 vessels, but not more than 230. Agrippa blockaded Antonius and attacked his lines of supply. Antonius's troops suffered in the heat of summer. They suffered from disease, probably malaria and dysentery. Finally, on the 2nd of September 31 BC, Antonius and Cleopatra's ships sailed out. They were met with a curved line of Octavius's navy, commanded by Marcus Agrippa. As Antonius's fleet headed out into the Ionian Sea, Agrippa ordered his ships to move back. At around midday, when the Yapix wind swept in from the northwest, Agrippa finally ordered his ships forward. The immense ships of Queen Cleopatra's flotilla inched forward and headed directly to Agrippa's centre, and broke through. Seeing his principal ally sail away, Antonius ordered his own ships to follow, and when it had caught up, he jumped aboard. But Agrippa did not go in hot pursuit of the fugitive and the other vessels following him. His objective was to destroy his opponent's capability to fight permanently. His ships took on Antonius's remaining fleet, encircling and ramming his heavy vessels. Despite their commander's desertion, Antonius's men still proved loyal and fought on bravely. Halfway through the Battle of Actium, it was not clear who was winning. Soon the artillery began lobbing incendiaries. Amidst the broken and burning ships, men fought determinedly, and hundreds drowned, weighed down by their armour. Only when the sun rose next morning was Octavius able to declare his victory complete. Agrippa had destroyed the fleet of Marcus Antonius. Several days later, his land army surrendered too. The victor of Actium delegated to Agrippa the task of repatriating his own legions and the captured men to Italy and demobbing them. Octavius went in pursuit of his fleeing enemy. A year later, Antonius and Cleopatra were dead. Julius Caesar's heir was left the unopposed supreme commander of all Roman military forces. Agrippa was elected consul with his friend for 28 and again in 27 BC. During those terms in office he helped negotiate with the Roman Senate for Octavius to govern the frontier provinces of the empire and, crucially, to take command of the armies located there for 10 years. The Senate acclaimed the man as Augustus, meaning the revered one, and the name by which he is still known. Thereafter these political and military powers were renewed for periods of 5 or 10 years, and control of the army gradually became the exclusive right of Augustus. His legal powers secured, Augustus then departed for Spain, leaving Agrippa in charge of affairs in Rome. The two men would alternate their tours of duty in the western and eastern halves of the empire for the next decade. While in the east, Agrippa befriended Herod the Great of Judea and stabilized the region, perhaps, according to one theory, even negotiating a treaty with Parthia for the return of prisoners and military standards lost at Carrhae in 53 BC by Crassus. Over the subsequent years, Augustus delegated management of the imperial provinces and their security to his team of hand-picked deputies, to men like Tiberius Claudius Nero, Publius Sulpicius Quirinius and Marcus Vinicius, but the foremost among them was Agrippa. He continued to prove his genius for military command by ending bloody rebellions from the Iberian Peninsula to the Black Sea. In northern Spain, the Asturias and Cantabria refused to bow to Roman control. Augustus had already fought them in person during the 20s BC, but they rose up again in 19 BC. While on duty in the west, Agrippa went to deal with the insurrection. On his arrival in the region, he found the legions demoralized and on the verge of mutiny. Stripping one legion of its honorific war title Augusta, as punishment, he used the carrot and stick approach to restore discipline and morale among the soldiery. There were setbacks. Roman troops trained for set-piece battles on the plain struggled to overwhelm men skilled in skirmishing and fighting on horseback in the foothills of the Cantabrian mountains. After a long and brutal season in the field, Agrippa finally wrote to Augustus that he had broken the rebellion. His campaign ended the war to conquer the Iberian Peninsula, which had begun 200 years before. For it he was awarded a triumph. Once again he declined it. 5 years later, a usurper named Scribonius seized control of the Cimmerian Bosporus, modern Crimea, from King Asander, who had apparently committed suicide. Then Governor-General in the east, Agrippa assembled an expeditionary force. In it was a fleet of ships provided by his friend King Herod the Great. In the meantime he requested the Roman ally Polemon I, King of Pontus, to go ahead of him and confront the upstart. Polemon arrived, seized and executed the pretender. The emergency over, Agrippa also took the opportunity to tie neighbouring Kerenezos to the Cimmerian Bosporus, securing control over the entire peninsula in the Black Sea for Rome. While constructing Portus Lulius, Agrippa had discovered a passion for building projects. As aedile, or minister of works, a post he had held since 33 BC, he repaired Rome's decaying sewerage system and overhauled her leaking aqueducts, installed a network of hundreds of fresh drinking water fountains, transformed public bathing in the city, created a magnificent public park in the Campus Martius, graced with artworks by great sculptors, and built the original Pantheon in honour of Augustus. The Pantheon, which stands today, is the structure rebuilt under Emperor Hadrian, who restored the name of its original builder on the entablature. By 18 BC, Agrippa had effectively become co-ruler of the Roman Empire with Augustus, and his legal powers were nearly as extensive. 2 years earlier, in recognition of their close working relationship, Agrippa had married his associate's daughter, Julia Caesaris. In 17 BC, he agreed for his 2 sons by her, Caius and Lucius, to be adopted by Augustus as potential heirs to the throne. As he entered his 5th decade of life, Agrippa could have decided to retire, but, ever restless, he was not one to sit idle. Few were as accomplished in conducting war as he was, so when a rebellion broke out in Illyricum and the governor appealed to Augustus for assistance, it was Agrippa who set off in the winter of 13 BC to deal with it. Learning of his imminent arrival, the rebels sued for terms. In the new year, Agrippa returned to Italy. He did not stop in Rome, but instead went directly to his private villa in Campania. There he fell seriously ill. Informed of the situation, Augustus rushed to be with him, but he was too late. By the time he arrived, Agrippa was already dead. He was just 51. Agrippa's death in 12 BC left Augustus bereft. His friend's body was laid in state in the Roman Forum, and he was given a state funeral. Augustus gave the eulogy and placed the urn containing Agrippa's ashes in his own mausoleum in the Campus Martius. The physical legacy of Marcus Agrippa was not only one of marble and brick. Agrippa's bloodline lived on in the imperial family through his sons Caius, Lucius and Postumus, and daughter Agrippina the Elder, and through her to his grandson Caius, better known as Caligula, and great-grandson Nero, who became emperors in their own right. Marcus Agrippa personified the term right-hand man. As the foremost deputy of Emperor Augustus, he waged wars, pacified provinces, befriended kings and potentates, beautified Rome, and played a crucial role in laying the foundations of the Pax Romana for the next 200 years. He served always in the knowledge he would never rule in his own right, and earned the gratitude of his friend and of the ordinary people of his nation for a lifetime of service performed in their names. Now, in a moment, news of what's coming up in the next episode. But first, as I mentioned at the start of this one, this episode is brought to you by Harrys.com. We love Harrys, and we know you will too if you decide to use their products. And we've got a great offer for you, $5 off your first purchase. So what is Harrys?
Well, as you know, one thing about great military men of the time is that they all had great moustaches. Hobart, Alan Brooke, Bernard Montgomery, Maitland Wilson, Archibald Wavell, they all had them. And to maintain a good moustache, what do you need? You need a good razor. And unlike the aforementioned British officer class, I don't personally sport a moustache, but I do need to scrub up every now and then and have that totally clean-shaven look. And thanks to Harrys, I can have just that, at a fraction of the cost I was paying for the normal off-the-shelf branded products I was buying. We all know that you get a great shave when you use great blades, and Harrys make their own blades. When they found the perfect blade, they actually bought the factory in Germany, and Harrys certainly know a thing or two about blades, as they've been making them since 1920. By making their own blades, they are able to supply them directly to your front door. They cut out the middleman, making them half the price of other branded blades. In fact, they even ship them for free. So if you use the code HISTORY at harrys.com, we can get you $5 off that first purchase. And for just $15, you can get the Truman starter set with razor, blades, and foaming shaving gel. The blades last really well, and in the Truman set you get 3 blade heads, so plenty of shaving there. So the Truman set really is a great starter set to have a go with from harrys.com, just for $15 direct to your door. But you can get it even cheaper by using discount code HISTORY at harrys.com on your first purchase, and you'll get it for an amazingly low $10 direct to your door. They also do other sets like the Winston set for just $25. These just great names for any history buff. Of course, that set, the Winston set, would be just $20 to you as your first purchase if you use history code at harrys.com. From then on, you can have blades delivered at intervals that suit you, whether you need new blades occasionally or more frequently. They have a plan to suit you, so whether you need to spot the everyday clean shave for the officer's mess, or whether you need to let that stubble grow a little to blend in on your undercover ops, harrys.com has just the plan you will need. You'll never be stuck without a fresh razor again. And you can even personalise the sets as a gift by using Harrys engraving service. Perfect.
So with Harrys blades being around half the price of other branded blades in the shops, and with $5 off your first purchase by using checkout code HISTORY at harrys.com, this is an offer that you've just got to take advantage of. And think about this, the average shaver can save up to $150 a year by using harrys.com.
So just go along to harrys.com to find out more about their range of other shaving products as well, and it will really help support us if you go along there and use that code HISTORY to get that $5 discount off your first purchase. Thanks so much.
Now, in a couple of weeks, in episode 6, we'll have a great script from Michael Gaby-Gross, who's written for us before. And this one is all about the battles of Saratoga. So we hope you'll join us for that. Now, would you like to write a script on a topic we've not covered, just as Michael has for the next episode? Why not drop us a line? Some of our most popular episodes have been written by listeners. You can support us in a number of other ways as well. You can make a donation using the donate button at the website. You can buy an older season from our store. These files are entire seasons chaptered into the episodes and cost just £2 each. You can follow us on Twitter. We are at History Network on there, and you can like our Facebook page. Just search for The History Network on Facebook to find us on there. We're also on YouTube. If you go to youtube.com/user/The History Network, you should find our channel on there. And if you didn't know, we've started releasing this season's audio podcasts on YouTube as well. But as well as those, you'll find other videos that we have available. So go and find us on YouTube. And of course, we'd love it if you took advantage of the harrys.com offer. Just go to harrys.com and at the checkout, use the discount code HistoryNet for $5 off your first purchase. So do get in touch if you've got ideas for podcasts, would like to write a script for us, or want to bring us up on an error or point of contention. Whatever it is, we love to hear from you, and it's info@the History Network to do that. Thanks again for listening. You've been listening to The History Network, written by Lindsay Powell, read by Nick Barker.